Hello, Yu-Gi-Oh players, and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJB0. Today, I decided since I only have about 10 wins left before I get to 750, which isn't, the biggest landmark in the world, but it means that I get to use Dark Armed as my background. I'm probably still going to use Tristan. Anyway, I decided since I just have 10 duels left to go before I reach that level, I was going to do all of those wins with Machina Mash. Because why not? So it looks like I'm fighting against Lightsworns. And he opens up with a recharge, discards the wolf, and mills two more Lightsworns, which is actually a pretty good mill. It was not looking good at that point. Especially when he used another recharge to discard another wolf, and of course draw two more and mill two more. Which one was a charge of the Light Brigade, but the other was this Esper Star Sparrow, which I had never seen in my life. And what it does is it special summons itself in defense from your graveyard when your opponent declares a direct attack. So he summons Aaron and ends his turn, and he mills Honest, JD, and Raiko. So one of the decisions you have to make with Neutron is whether or not you want to attack. There are very few cards that your opponent's going to activate upon the summon of Neutron to get rid of it, but a lot of the time they will try to deprison or mirror force it when you attack with it. So I usually have to make the decision as to whether or not I want to attack with it. In this case, I was deciding, I thought that he had Honest in his hand, even though I was dumb because he had it on top of his graveyard, so I knew he didn't have it. So I decided to go into the battle phase and run over that Aaron, which, of course, nothing happened. Went to the end phase, went for Birdman, because in my experience, you always want to search out the Birdman first thing with Neutron, unless you opened with a Deco, just because Birdman has more combos, and you're more likely to be able to use him early on in the game. So I let him go with the Birdman in my hand. This is not looking like the best hand in the world. There are, of course, plays that I can make, but overall, it just is not amazing. Pot of Duplicity isn't particularly live in my hand right now, but it looks like he's going to start off overextending. He discards Herald of Creation, which is an interesting choice for this deck. Sorry, my throat's feeling scratchy. And he special summons the JD, so he's way overextending turn one, trying to get some early advantage on me. Which he obviously hasn't, seeing as he went minus to do this. But he's hoping to get those big mills. And he does, in fact, get those big mills. I noticed later, after the game, that he only milled 5 at this point. If you look at this, because JD is supposed to mill 4, and Jane is supposed to mill 2, but he only mills 5 cards. I just didn't notice that until later. And then I draw into Effect Veiler, which isn't especially useful, but I think at this point I have a plan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to special summon that Cyber Dragon, and then normal summon the Birdman. I'm going to try and go for a Crimson Blader play. I hesitate for a moment because I think that I'd have to get over the JD. And then I realized I have a Chaos Sorcerer in my hand. In retrospect, if I had thought about this, I probably would have held back, considering the fact that it was likely he had a Veiler in his hand. And if he Veilered my Sorcerer, this would not be good. But I decided I was going to go for the Sorcerer play. I hadn't lost a whole lot of advantage in the first place. And, I'd still go up plus if I did this. So I decided to banish the JD with the Sorcerer, which turned out to go pretty well for me. It was just about at this point that I realized it was possible he had Veiler. But he didn't use it, so I run over his Jane with the Crimson Blader. So now he can't summon another JD during his next turn, which he could have done, of course, because he had 4 Lightsworns in his grave, and he'd only milled that one JD, so it was still highly likely that he was going to draw into one or already had one in his hand, considering the fact that he only had 20 cards in his deck. So he goes for that Dark Hole, which kind of sucks majorly. And I still have nothing I can do. So I hit the Pot of Duplicity button because now I have a machine, a spellcaster, and a warrior in my grave. So I can put that Chaos Sorcerer, Crimson Blader, and Neutron back and draw 2 cards. Pot of Duplicity is a pretty good card for this deck. I'd, of course, rather have Avarice, which pains me in the deepest part of my soul to say. But it's still a really good card late game, and at this point it definitely saved me. In retrospect, I could have hit the MST button and hit that, but of course it turns out to be a bad idea. So this is where things get crazy. So I roll that die, and I'm like, please don't be a 6, and I got a 6. So he draws the 6 cards, and I am very close to scooping at this point, because he just drew 6 cards off of 6 cents. He went +5 for free. So my terrible luck continues at this point. And so now it's not looking good for me. I decide to play it out just for the sake of playing it out, but all in all, I didn't think that I was going to get very far now that he had, what is it, like 10 cards in his hand, something like that. So when he draws for turn, I hit the Max C button, then he goes for Lumina. So it turns out that Max C was going to be a really good idea, because he isn't just going to sit on that Lumina at this point, especially with that many cards in his hand. So he's using its effect to discard a wolf and summon another Lumina, which he then uses to discard and summon another Lumina. And this is getting pretty crazy, but I think that I can handle it because of Tragodia. He'd have to go into his main phase 2 in order to take it out with a JD, because it'll have that 3,000 attack points. 3,000 attack, 3,000 defense. He goes for the Lumina, so he'll have more attack and defense than the JD. He goes for Cephalon, which is kind of scary, and he decides to stop there for now. And he attacks directly with the Lumina. At this point, I realize that I have enough cards in my hand that Tragodia can actually survive the Cephalon's attack, so I special summon the Tragodia in defense. And he is not sure what to do at this point. So that Max C turned out to be a really good move. He took the Max C challenge very foolishly and tried to take me out in one turn. And of course I had that Tragodia to defend. So I'm about to draw another card because he's got Hyades. And then he summons M7. So that was crazy. It almost looks like he's trying to give me extra draws at this point. So far, I have survived 6th Sense for a turn, which is pretty amazing, in my opinion. And at the end phase, he mills 3 for the Lumina, and they all turn out to be back row, so I'm not particularly worried. So at this point, I have a ton of options in my hand. I have 3 gear frames, a Neutron, Tragodia. I hit the MST button, and of course, it's Beckoning Light. Because that's what Lightsworns do. So he discards his whole hand, and he retrieves. I don't actually remember what he retrieved at this point. So he gets back, I think of course he gets back Honest, 1 Herald of Creation to get back that Cephalon, an Honest. He gets back, I think a Jane. It must have been a Jane. A Raikou, and a Garoth. Okay. So I decide that at this point I don't really gain a lot from keeping that Tragodia on the board. Of course I can attack into the Cephalon, but he's going to have that Honest, so my Tragodia is going to die. So I decide to activate Dark Hole to blast the board, and of course I don't really lose any advantage off of that, even though I lose my big boss monster. Of course, I do have another Tragodia, another Max C, and a Veiler in my hand. So I think I'm okay on the defensive side, so I go for that Machina Gear Frame. Search out my Machina Fortress. I don't think I'm going to be able to OTK. Of course, I'm definitely not going to be able to, because I need to be able to use my normal summon in order to use this hand. But I decide I'm going to deal as much damage as possible, and then put the Gear Frame on the back of the Machina Fortress so it can't be killed. So not only at this point have I survived the 6th Sense draw 6, but it seems I've actually gained advantage over my opponent at this point. I've cleared the board, and I've reestablished a field and a hand, which, in my opinion, is a pretty good start. So he hits the Esper Star Sparrow button just to make sure that I can't hit him directly with that fortress. And of course it's banished because of its effect. And then main phase 2, I decide to equip that gear frame. So yeah, Machina Mash is looking really good right now. I'm really liking that triple Max C. It's helped me in a ton of games so far because they're just... It allows me to deck thin, it gives my deck more consistency, and it gives me ways of stopping my opponent's plays. Since I know that my opponent has the materials to make some pretty crazy plays, I decide to open with the Max C in his draw phase, so that, you know, if he draws into his other JD, which I know he had somewhere in that deck, I'll still get the draw off it. So I decide to Valor the Herald of Creation, just because I don't want a Cephalon on the board, because a Cephalon attacking with Honest behind it will basically end the game. So during my main phase, I decide that I'm going to try and unequip that gear frame to special summon an attack position. I'm looking at his graveyard trying to decide if he has the JDs available to him to get over my my gear frame. My goal right now is to put a Maestroke on the board that my opponent has to attack over in order to get any damage against me, because right now if he can get over one of my monsters, it's probably going to turn out to be an OTK just because I only have half my life points left. I use its effect, he Valors rather belatedly, and then I'm like, okay, whatever. So I decide at this point I'm going to bait out that Honest, because I know it's unlikely that he's going to be able to get it back after this, and he'd have to wait a turn in order to do it, in which case I'd be able to OTK him. So I try to bait out the Honest, after deciding what I'm going to do with my extra deck this turn, apparently. So I decide to bait out the Honest by attacking into that Herald of Creation, and of course he does hit the Honest button to take out my fortress. In all honesty, ironically enough, if he had let that fortress go through, I would have been able to OTK with a Cowboy. So it was probably for the better in his case that he did Honest, but it did open up my plays really nicely. So main phase 2, I go for that Maestroke so that if he gets that JD, he can't get rid of it next turn, and even Cephalon won't be able to get over it. And then just kind of my plan right now is to stall. Next turn I can use the Machina Cannon to get Fortress back on the board. I can use Neutron to get another tuner from my deck. I just have options, so I decide to set the Lance and pass. At this point, he only has 8 cards left in his deck. There was actually a game last night against basically the same deck where he took the Max Seed, or he Max Seed, and I decided that I was going to take the Max Seed challenge. I ended up decking him out. So he goes for that Cephalon, and he doesn't decide to use its effect, which I thought was interesting, because he does have Honest in the graveyard. But he attacks over the Maestroke, which then, you know, does its thing. And at this point, I have a feeling that I have game. So what I'm going to do is first decide whether or not I have game, because the chances are that card that he has face down defense position is a Raikou. So if he flips that Raikou and destroys my last monster, he can stop the play from going through. So right now I am calculating whether or not I think that I can survive attacking my fortress into that Cephalon. Turns out that it'll only take 1,500 of my life points to attack into that Cephalon and destroy it. So I decide that that's what I'm going to do. So my plan at this point is to special summon the fortress, normal summon the Neutron, and I'm going to attack the fortress into the Cephalon, and then attack the Raikou with Neutron, because if it's a Raikou, and he flips it up. I want him to have to destroy my Maestro, and since he can't destroy my Maestro, I can attack with Maestro for a game. The only thing that can really stop this play at this point is if he mills Necro Gardener or another Esper Star Sparrow, or even maybe a Wolf if he has any left. I don't actually remember if he did. So I wait for that mill, and he doesn't have anything, so I attack for game. So I did beat out Cephalon Sworn with 6 cents when he drew 6. So thank you guys for watching. This is the RJB0, and I got a jet.